step in the
Of course.
light here. Well, thank you for coming this evening. Nice to see people we haven't seen for a while and good friends. I'm Dan Hall. I'm the producer of the Truth Report and CPR events like this, Christians Talking Politics and Religion. And we do this monthly on the third Monday at 6:30. There's never a cost, so invite people to be here. By the way, next month we will have, I believe they call it the 1916 Project, which is a film that is supposed to be really good and challenging for all of us about our culture and what's going on. So I hope you can make it for that. A little housekeeping, the restrooms are out in the foyer to the right if you need to use that. I also would like to introduce my wife, Valerie, who does half the ministry I do. It's because of her. I think it's really important that for me, I was never in the military. I had a father that was in World War II, but he didn't talk much about it, and to tell you the truth, I didn't know him real well. He was my biological father. But as I've gotten older here, I've learned to highly respect those that are in the military. I hate to say it like this, but I used to think of them as kind of another sport. You know, the captain of the team, and did they play in the nationals? And those were the big guns. And I've learned to realize that sports is a game. The military is putting their life on the line for me and for my country, and that's a whole big difference. And so as I've learned more, I've learned to respect those that are in the military and gone through all that. So let's stand first I'm going to open with prayer, and then I'll introduce our speaker. Father, we're grateful that we do live in a country like this and that we can honor you and those that serve our military. And we ask your blessing upon them tonight and upon our speakers, Terry and his wife Barb both. And your blessing upon our time here, that we might walk away encouraged for the future of America, and to hear some of the great stories that help produce America and hold us free. Amen. If you can be seated, because what I'd like to do is, if you're in the military or ever were, would you stand up? Let's give them a hand. Yeah, wow. Got a lot of them. Thank you. So, it is my pleasure to introduce, oh, Barb's got to be hugging somebody out there. Introduce Colonel Terry Branham and his wife, Barb. Barb, you want to come up now? No, you can come up whenever you want. You'll wait? Okay. And I'm going to let Terry explain who he is, and I appreciate him wearing his dress. Is that what they call it?
Dress blues.
And this is what I thought about when I thought about having Terry here. I thought about the Christmas movie where they have the general and they sing the song, and they have a big party for him. Do you remember that? I mean, what's the name of that? White Christmas. And I move to tears every time I see it. It's one of those that I have to watch every year. But I don't want to talk. We are videotaping this, and it will be out there within a week or so, and everyone can pass it around as you can. Colonel Terry Branham.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here. It's an honor to speak with you. My name is Terry Branham. I grew up in International Falls and Cloquet, Minnesota, if you've heard of those places. Both my parents came from International Falls and Baudette area. My dad in Baudette, my mom grew up in International Falls. So We spent a lot of summers up there and a lot of time up there, and I still have cousins up there that I go fishing with and such, so I love it up north. But my dad was named William Harrison Branham, and his father and grandfather were also named William Harrison Branham. My mom did not want me to be like the 8th William Harrison Branham, so she changed it up and said, he's going to be Terry. So I'm Terry William Branham. I want to tell you my stories from my 26-year career in the Army, of being shot at in 3 wars, and how my faith served me during my 26-year Army career. My story really begins with my dad's story. My dad took his wife and 7 kids to church every Sunday. Our home, of course, had a Bible at the center, on the center coffee table in the living room. I was proud of our first humble home. It was built in 1898, and my mom and dad had 7 kids in this 2-bedroom house. And Dad, to tell you his story, my dad was a week before he turned 18, and he had joined the Navy. He was an anti-aircraft gunner on a destroyer in the South Pacific when the military was moving through the South Pacific, and he was on a U.S. destroyer. His aircraft was attacked by Japanese aircraft, and he was an anti-aircraft gunner. And he was engaging the aircraft, and his loader got shot. He saw him get shot and fall, and then bullets took his left leg off above the knee, and he had wounds in his right leg and his chest and his arm. He still had the bullet scars to prove it. To save his life, they put a tourniquet on him, and the wound was right about here where he lost his leg, so they put a tourniquet up here and threw him into the ocean, thinking that the salt water was probably the best way to save his life, because the salt water would coagulate the blood. Now, there were sharks in the water, but he was like, well, this is my best bet, throw me in the ocean. So luckily, this lifeboat dragged him into a lifeboat not too long after he was in the water, and they got him on a ship back to Hawaii and another ship to San Francisco, and they put him on what was called the amputee train from San Francisco to Philadelphia. And he spent 2 years in Philadelphia. They had to do multiple more amputations to get things where they had tissue that would stay alive. So he said his days in the hospital were kind of wild, and he was with other wounded Navy guys, and his dad came to see him about a year after when he was getting ready to be released, and they said, well, what have you been doing? And Dad said, well, on the weekends we go to the bars and get in fights. And he said, really? That you get drunk and you go get in fights? And he goes, okay, you need to clean up your life, stop drinking, and move back to International Falls, and I'll help you get a job, and get your life cleaned up and find a wife and make a family. Dad said, okay. So at 19 years old, he's back in International Falls, going to bars, getting in fights, and that's what the sailors did back then, I guess. My dad was taller than me. He was 6'2". Now you picture he had missing a leg, so he was on crutches for about 18 months from the time he was 18 through he was almost 20 years old. So he had a chest and shoulders that could, to give you an example, there was a kid that was bullying me one day in the backyard, and my dad walked out to him, and the guy was about the size of Len. My dad went up to the guy, picked him up under the neck, lifted him up, and pinned him against the wall and said, if you ever hurt my son, I'm coming after you. And he threw him down on the ground. The bully never picked on me ever again. That was my dad. So we had this house built in 1898, and Dad only had an 8th grade education because he joined the military so early, but he had a mind for mathematics. he could compute things in his mind that you and I would be challenged to do if we even practiced it. So he got a job at a hydroelectric dam computing the water flow to determine how much electricity it could create. And that was his shift job, is he would go down to the dam and compute water flow going through the turbines, flowing through the chutes, to compute how much electricity he was told to produce. So that was his job. So he was smart in that way, and there was nothing he couldn't do. He fixed his own cars. When he finally had 7 kids and they felt like this house just isn't big enough, he bought land and he built a split-level house, 2-story split-level house. If you can picture this, I'm 18 years old, my brother is 16. My dad goes up a ladder to be on the second floor story of the house, and he's teaching us how to shingle the roof. My dad with a 75-pound wooden leg on a 2-story roof. That's the kind of, he had no fear. He just was, I can do this and I'm going to do this. He did everything in our house, and he helped us learn how to build walls. We built the walls and built the bedroom walls and the living room wall and the lower level. And I mean, he was just amazing. If he didn't know how to do it, he'd figure out how to do it. That was typical of guys back then, I think. Another great thing I like to bring up is the history of the name William Harrison Branham is pretty interesting. It's a namesake that goes back to General Forge at Valley Forge. General Washington at Valley Forge. There was a William Harrison Branham there who had 2 of his relatives there, James and Eben Branham. James was the younger. He was 18 years old. And if you read anything about Valley Forge, you know that the winters were pretty harsh. They didn't have boots for everybody. It wasn't uncommon for the young guys to pull guard duty in their stockings feet, with maybe a parka, maybe not even a parka. And James died while he was at Valley Forge. Eben was a sergeant. He was in a little bit better shape. He lived through that, and he fought with Washington at Philadelphia, and he was killed in the battle at Philadelphia. So we had some history there. So then my great-grandfather served in the Minnesota Cavalry, and if you go look up the Minnesota National Guard, Fort Snelling, 1861 to 1865, you'll see a William Harrison Branham there. There was another William Harrison Branham at Fort Snelling during the Indian Wars from 1861 to 1865. So, and then my dad's dad was a master sergeant in the infantry in the Minnesota National Guard Red Bulls, and they got deployed to Alaska for the entirety of the war in Alaska, in the Aleutian Islands, and he served 4 years there, repelling the continuous attacks by the Japanese. He was wounded several times, and he came home from Alaska, and I did meet him when I was a young boy. I don't remember him, and he was in such bad shape. He moved to Detroit, where another soldier he had served with in Alaska was going to live, and he died in Detroit. My mom and dad, I remember, went to the funeral there for him, but I only met him briefly, but he was a legend in my dad's eyes, and pretty good stock. So my dad said, if you ever go in the military, you have to be enlisted. I said, okay. But my dad always challenged me. So when I graduated high school, he said, I want you to go get your scuba diver license, and I want you to go into Lake Superior and go down to 90 feet. Okay, Dad. So I did that. So I accomplished that task. Then the next summer, I had a pretty good job. My mom was working at the Wrench Hall refinery, so she got me a job there. There's several of the employee kids could go there, and we'd clear brush and mow the lawns and stuff. So I was making pretty good money. So he said, now I want you to go to learn how to fly so you're not afraid of heights. So I went out to the Cloquet Airport, and I said, I want to learn how to fly. And they said, okay. So I learned how to fly a little Cessna 150 and then a 172, and I was taking flight lessons with a friend I had met at the airport named Steve Simula. And Steve and I became very close friends. We were learning to fly together. We would do night cross countries, flights from here to Hibbing. And one day my dad said, go do a cross-country flight, come down to Spooner, Wisconsin. My dad was a regional guy for Minnesota, Minneapolis Star and Tribune. And his territory took him all the way down into Wisconsin. So he said, fly down to Spooner and I'll meet you at the airport and we'll have a cup of coffee and then you can fly home. Okay, so I flew down there, had coffee. I'm going like, Dad, there's like thunderstorms coming. I need to be leaving pretty soon. He said, okay, go ahead. So I take off. So my flight back should have been like 45 minutes. It took me an hour and a half because I was dodging thunderstorms all the way coming back. But I made it, and it was a credit to my ability to go out and fly by myself and not be afraid. But my dad would, when he worked at the dam, he would have my brother come down, my brother and I come down there, and he had a .22 single-shot rifle. And we'd throw bottles and cans into the river, and we'd shoot them. So we got to be pretty good shooters. So I'm about 12 years old now, and Dad says, come down to the dam. Okay, I show up, and he goes, here's a .22. I want you to go into the woods, find something for dinner. Don't come back until you have something for dinner. Do not come back until you have something for dinner. Okay? So I'm out in the woods there. I'd never been in the woods there out by the dam. And it's by the railroad tracks, and there's bums by the dam all the time. And so I was trying to stay away from the railroad tracks where all the bums were and didn't want to really get into anything with them. So I'm out in the woods wandering around. Finally, I get a bunny. I got a bunny. I got dinner. I got a bunny. That's good enough for me. So I go back and I show Dad my bunny. He goes, okay, now I got to show you how to clean it so we can make it for dinner. So he showed me how to clean the bunny, and we had the bunny for dinner. But that was the kind of challenges that he gave us when, to make us men. So I told you after high school I had to get my scuba diver, and then I went to get my private pilot license after my first year of college, and I had a pretty good job, and I had been playing hockey for Cloquet, and I was pretty good ice hockey player. Dad had me on the ice at like 4 years old because he had been a hockey player. So I'm a hockey player. So I go to St. Cloud to play ice hockey because my best friend was going there to play football. And so we both go to St. Cloud State, and he's playing football, and I make the hockey team, and I'm doing pretty well. And I make my first year through the hockey program. We're having a good time, and I'm going to go back for my second year. So I go home in the summer, and my dad says, well, what are you going to do now? I said, well, Dad, I've completed 2 years of college, and it's not that much fun for me. I don't like it. I don't drink. I'm an athlete. I don't like to go drinking with the other guys that are just going and having all these beer parties. And that's not me. So I'm going to join the Army, and I'm going to go fly helicopters. And he went, oh, okay. So I had gone and signed up, and I'd taken Steve Simula with me, and I said, Steve, I'm going to go join to fly helicopters. Do you want to fly helicopter? He says, no, I want to be in fixed wing. So there was this fixed wing program that my dad said to me, he said, when you go to sign up, you have to be enlisted for at least a year, because I want you to know what it's like to take orders from somebody you might not respect too much. I said, okay, I don't understand that, but I'll do what you say. So I go sign up, and I sign up, and I go down and I take the flight aptitude test, and because I had done flying, I did very well, and I qualified, and they said, okay, you're ready to go. And Steve said, well, I'm going to go to Mohawk school, and that was a flying right seat equipment operator, and the Mohawk was an aircraft they used in Vietnam, and it would fly, and it had detection equipment that would see convoys, and it would see groups of people, and it would actually have a system that we would deploy, and it would smell people in the jungles, so we knew if there were big congregations of people under the jungle, we knew exactly where we were, and it would tell us, about more than 50 people at this, and they'd give us grid coordinates, and then we'd call in airstrikes and that sort of thing. So that was the mission of the Mohawk. And so we went through basic training, and I had to have more enlisted time, so I went off to the Mohawk training with Steve and went through that school. And then during I was in that school, I applied to go right to flight school. And so we graduated from that school, and Steve went to Vietnam, and I went off to rotary wing flight school. So I went home, but first I got to back up a little bit. As I was there then, the captain liked me, and he knew I was going to OCS, so he gave me some responsibility, and he says, "You're going to be an acting sergeant. You're in charge of the barracks." I said, "Okay." So you go inspect the barracks, you make sure they're clean, make sure nobody's doing drugs in my barracks, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so I'm doing that, and I'm there one Saturday morning, and these guys that I kind of thought were hoodlums, if we used that term back then, I don't know if you did, they were kind of tough kids, and they were always going to Mexico on the weekend, and they'd go on Friday night, and they'd come back Sunday morning. And I just happened to, when they came back Sunday morning, I was walking in behind them, and I saw them carrying some bags, and I kind of walked in behind them and kind of looking up the stairwell, and they were on a ladder, and they were stuffing some bags of stuff up in the ceiling tile. I went, "I'll bet it's drugs." So I went over to the orderly room, and I told the captain, I said, "These 4 guys, Jim, John, Mike, and Brian, just came back from Mexico, and they were putting bags of something in the ceiling tile just at the top of the stairs, in on top of the ceiling tile. Okay, let's go ahead and do a health and welfare inspection." So we go over there, and they go get the ladder, and these guys are looking at them like, "What? They got the ladder? How do they know about the ladder?" And they go right to the floor, the ceiling tile, and they go up in the ceiling, and they find like $2,000 worth of marijuana. And they go, "Jim, Brian, George, Mike, you're going with us." They had the MPs outside. The MPs came out, put cuffs on them, took them off to jail. So they booked them, and then they released them back to the unit. So then they're wandering around the unit going like, "Who tattled on us? Who ratted us out? We want to know. Somebody tell us who ratted us out." And I'm the barracks sergeant now. The captain's made me the barracks sergeant, so I'm wandering around all the time. "Branham, you know who ratted us out?" "I have no idea, man. I didn't see you guys even come back." "Okay, if you find out, you let us know." "Yeah, sure, I will." Okay, so comes the day of their trial. I say, "Okay," I go to the captain, I say, "How's this going to work?" And he said, "I put you in for OCS." He said, "I think you've got some guts and courage and morals, so I think you'd be a good officer. So you're going to go to OCS. And I'm going to make the court date the day you leave the base to go to OCS." I said, "That works for me." So I said, "I want to make sure I have a quick getaway." So I had a car from high school, because I had a job all through high school. So I had a car sitting back home in Cloquet. So I flew home, and I told Dad what was going on. I said, "I need to make a quick exit from Fort Huachuca to make sure that I'm still able to walk out of Fort Huachuca." He said, "Okay, take your car back." So I had my car back there, and as soon as so the trial's all ready to start, and the judge is up there, and the defendants are all sitting in the booth, and the judge says, "Okay, bring in your eyewitness." So here comes Branham walking down the aisle, and they all turn at me, and they're looking like, they're going like this, and I go, and I did one of those single finger salutes to them, and walked up and took the stand, and the judge said, "Tell us your story, Private Branham." "Yes, sir. I'm acting sergeant. I was on duty in the barracks, and I saw these guys come back from Mexico, and I had suspected they were dealing drugs, and I saw them put some bags in the ceiling tile. So I went and told the captain, and he went and he found the drugs, and here's who I saw do it. And those are the 4 defendants right there. And he said, where do you go now? I said, I'm leaving here and going off to officer candidate school at an undisclosed location. And he said, okay. So I left and I went and got my car, and I was going to, I had talked to the Department of the Army, and I said, I want flight school and I want OCS. And they said, we want you to be a field artillery officer at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So you're going to go to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for field artillery, become a second lieutenant there. I said, sounds like fun. So that's where I left. I drove up from Fort Huachuca, Arizona to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and parked my car that I didn't drive again for another 6 months. I'd go start it up every week just to make sure it would run. And I went through OCS, and it was, OCS is, if you've ever heard about it, it's challenging as all get out. It's like 18-hour days. I think I probably ran, every week we would run to a hill that was called MB4 on Fort Sill. And it was 4 miles away, and then it was 2 miles up the hill, and then 2 miles back down the hill, and then 4 miles back to our barracks. So that was every weekend we had to do that run. And then during the week, we also ran 1 to 2 miles every morning and then 1 to 2 miles at night. So I was a runner by then. I was doing real well, and I was in good shape, and so it wasn't a problem for me, but that's how I got my start in field artillery. So I was so the captain sent me to OCS, and I went to the trial, and they were convicted, and then I left. I kept looking over my shoulders for a few years while I was still in the United States, wondering, are these guys ever going to find me? I should be looking to make sure they don't know where I am. I enjoyed field artillery school, and then I had qualified for flight school. So as soon as I graduated from officer candidate school as second lieutenant, I was going over to Fort Rucker, Alabama to become a helicopter pilot, because that's what I wanted to fly. And so I left as a second lieutenant, I went home and saw my parents for 2 days, drove down to Alabama to become a helicopter pilot. And that's where I learned how to fly helicopters. Loved flying helicopters. Nothing more fun than flying a helicopter. It's like riding a horse. If you've ever ridden a horse, it's as good as riding a horse, okay? I did well in flight school because of my flight experience. I graduated in the top 10% of my class because of my flight experience. So I got my aircraft of choice. So I thought, I want Cobra gunships. I want to go to Vietnam, fly Cobra gunships. So all this time I'm going home, and during those days the Vietnam War was live on TV, and you saw the helicopters all the time, and you saw the battles, and I was wired to go do that. I wanted to go do that. And I thought I was invincible, like most 21-year-old guys do, think they're invincible. So I asked for Cobra gunships. I got that training. I went down to Savannah, Georgia to become a Cobra gunship pilot. And there was only one place Cobra gunship pilots went, and that was Vietnam. So I said, I'm fine with that. That's what I want. I want to go to Vietnam. So I went to Vietnam. I showed up in my unit, and it was primarily a gunship unit, but we had some Hueys. That's a infantry carrying vehicle, because we had a small platoon that when we would capture guys, we'd bring out this little infantry platoon, and they would capture the bad guys that we had corralled in that had done the Chu Hoi I surrender, and we'd police them up and take them back and put them in jail. But so a Cobra gunship pilot. So everything in Vietnam was a day thing. So infantry guys had to do 180 days outside the wire, meaning they slept in the field, in the wet, in the rain, and what have you. Helicopter pilots had to do gunship pilots had to do 350 days of being shot at 4 hours a day for 350 days before you could go home. So you were lucky if you made it out alive. You were lucky if you were maybe just a few days short of a full year, because it took that many, because you could only fly so many days in a row before they'd say, okay, you need to have a mandatory day off. You've been flying for 4 or 5 days in a row, you need to take a day off, rest a little bit, clear your head. So you take a day off, then you'd be back out at it. So one of my best memories was in our area of operations was a mountain called Nui Ba Din. And the area we were at was totally flat, rice fields for nothing but hundreds of miles. But right in north of our base, about 40 miles, was Nui Ba Din, 4,500 feet tall in the middle of nowhere. It had been an active volcano back several hundred years before, 4,500 feet tall, and the U.S. had a communication site on top of it, and they used that for the Saigon commanders to talk to the commanders all the way in the north part of South Vietnam. So it was a critical piece of territory. So the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, always wanted to take over that communication site or take it out. So half my missions were always at Nui Ba Din. I got my Silver Star at Nui Ba Din, I got my Bronze Star at Nui Ba Din, I got my Flying Cross at Nui Ba Din. Everything always happened at Nui Ba Din because on an average weekday, we would go up there and the North Vietnamese would be having hundreds of infantry guys scaling that mountain to get to the top. And we would spend all day there rearming and refueling, going out, shooting at bad guys, going up the mountain to get to our guys on top all day long. Wouldn't be exaggeration to spend 8 to 10, 12 hours flying, doing nothing but back and forth, refuel, rearm, go back out, shoot more rockets. And when the infantry is going up the hill, you can't fly over them and shoot your minigun because your hot brass will fall on the infantry. So you have to wait till you clear the infantry, and then you could shoot your stuff. So by then, you're within 1,000 yards, which is the range of a North Vietnamese rifle. So we have tracers coming by the aircraft by the score and hitting the aircraft, ping, 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 and you always knew when you were getting hit because you heard ping, 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 ping. That was aircraft getting hit by bullets. So that was a way of life every day. There were 28 pilots in our unit. Sadly to say, 18 of them went home in a box. When I got there, I said, I'm a Christian and I'd like to fly with other Christian pilots. And they said, okay, there's only 8 of you, but you're welcome. But nobody else will fly with you because you guys pray in the aircraft before the mission, during the mission, after the mission, before you get on the mission, while you're loading the aircraft, you're always praying. And the guys that aren't believers don't want to be a part of that. They said, we're fine with that. I don't need to be around with them either. So it was all the Christian men that would fly. But then the sad part of it was when somebody would get shot and there would be blood in the aircraft, they go, okay, you guys are the killers, so you guys get to go clean up the blood in the aircraft of the guys that were shot, our friendly guys that were shot. So some of my worst PTSD was out there in the hot sun soaking up blood in the cockpits and the floors of helicopters and squeezing it out into buckets because of men that I knew and loved and respected that had been shot. And so that was one of the toughest things about Vietnam, was losing your buddies. But you learn right from the beginning, we had a standard prayer. And it was easy for us to remember. It was verse 4 of the 23rd Psalm. So there would be 2 aircraft in a mission at all times, so that's 4 pilots. So the 4 pilots would get together and we'd be in a huddle and we'd say, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with us. Your rod and your staff, they comfort us. And say, let's go to war. And that's how we went to battle every day. And then when we'd be in a mission where we're taking a lot of ping, 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 we'd be praying over the aircraft. Heavenly Father, protect this aircraft, keep us in the sky. You could name it. You name the prayer, we had it, we said it. But it was always, we were praying between the aircraft all the time And that was our solace. That was our rock. That was our courage. That was what made it work. That was what made it. If it doesn't matter if we live or die, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we're doing it to the glory of God, protecting our brothers. And that's how we felt. I'll be very honest with you. It kind of sounds kind of bravado, but I'm sorry, that's the way you have to be. If you're a warrior, that's who you are. So, tell you one mission about Nui Badin. So, it's nighttime mission, and the clouds are high, so it's okay. The top of the mountain is clear, and they say we have North Vietnamese army in the wire. We need your rockets 10 feet from our flashlights. So the infantry would put flashlights in the helmets and put them on the ground next to them, so we would see these flashlights coming up in their trenches. And he'd say, 10 feet in front of the flashlights at night. I say, I can do that. So I would roll in, I'd be the lead aircraft, say, okay, I got it. And so I'm shooting rockets, and the rockets go out of the aircraft and go, and they're going, and we're not shooting minigun because that's too hard to control. So we're just doing rockets as we walk down this line of 10 feet in front of the flashlights, and they're saying, that's it, sir, that's it, keep it there, keep it going there, keep it going there. So I just keep going. So I overfly the target, they light me up, they riddle me with aircraft, my aircraft with bullets. I've got oil leaking, I got transmission fluid leaking, the flight controls are freezing up. I go in like Centaur 4-6 was my call sign. Centaur 4-6, I've been hit, I'm returning to Tain In. So I break off, and my wingman said, I'll follow you to make sure you get back. So he follows me back. So I get to the runway. So when you lose your hydraulics, I lost my hydraulics, and I was losing transmission fluid. So I lost the hydraulics, so the hydraulic power level would not go down. So the power level stuck up here, which was for diving, keeping my diving. So I can't get it to go down. So I'm having to dive the aircraft down, like 80, 90-degree dives, getting up to 150 miles an hour, and then pull out of it, and then make big wide turns, and then doing that again. And finally, I'm down to about 500 feet, and I can see the runway at Tain In, and so I line up with the runway. My front seat guy was named Rudy Paris. Rudy was my front seat guy my entire time there. I loved Rudy. So this is the funny part of the story. Rudy and I were the only two red-haired guys in the unit. So they called us, you can figure out the names, Pinky and Red and Freckles, and we both had freckles and bright red hair, and we didn't care. So we were a team. So I said, Rudy, okay, I've got the runway lined up, and I'm going to make a run-on landing. And the ambulances are there, and the air maintenance crews are at the strip. And I hit the runway at about 60 miles an hour, and on skids, helicopters on skids. So it's going like this, and I'm barely keeping it, upright, and trying to keep the thing going down the runway, and it stops, and go, wow, Rudy, we made it. So we get out of the aircraft, and they come to tow it away to go fix it, and we get out of the aircraft, and we go into the barracks and say, wow, that was quite a mission. And so but they didn't disappoint us. They flew another aircraft up for us to be there in the morning so that we'd be ready to go back out to Nui Ba Din the next day. That was the way it worked back in Vietnam. Is okay, we'll get another aircraft for you, go back out there. So we were back out at Nui Ba Din the next day. But sadly, I have to tell you, so Rudy I kept in truck. Rudy stayed in the Army, as did I. I went to Germany. He went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And Rudy went with the unit out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. They went to peacekeeping duty in Israel in 1982. And I had come home from Germany in 1983, and I called his number, and his wife answered the phone. I said, I won't tell you her name. I said, this is Terry Branham, calling for Rudy. Terry, Rudy was on the peacekeeping aircraft coming back from Israel, and when they went into Nova Scotia to refuel, some Middle Eastern terrorists put a bomb on the aircraft, and when the aircraft took off, it blew up, and everybody died. 252 soldiers on that aircraft died on 12 December 1985. And Rudy died that day, and I told his wife I was very sorry. I said, I loved Rudy like a brother, and I'll miss him forever. I'll never forget all the wonderful times that we had together, and she's doing well. I've checked in with her occasionally just to see that she's okay. So after Vietnam, I went back to Cloquet, and several years later, I stayed in the military. I was still single, and I went home to visit my family at Christmas, and I went to see a friend who knew everybody in our class, and I went to see him to go have a beer and say hi, and I did, and then he said, oh, I'm going to meet Barb Haug for coffee. I said, oh, I'd love to come. So we went to this coffee shop in Lincolndale. And sorry. My girl Barbie saw me, and she ran and she jumped into my arms. And she's, Branham, where have you been? Yeah, we grew up together. We lived like 3 blocks apart. We used to play kick the can and all those fun kid games, you know. So we were like best friends. Going through high school, we dated different. I had a girlfriend. She dated my crummy friends, and I'm sorry. I say, and she'd always come to me and say, he did this, and I'd say, oh, Barb, I'm so sorry, and I'd comfort her and say, you know, you're wonderful, and don't take that, and you deserve somebody better. And so we were these best friends. We were just best friends. And so to see her that day, and 23 years later, and it was like we hadn't missed. And Steve could see there was truly something between us, and he wanted something between her and he, and he could see there was only one way she was looking, and so he said, I'll leave you guys. And we sat there for 4 hours and just talked and caught up, and absolutely fell in love. And I went home. The next day I went to her house to meet her daughter, and I was in town for another week, and then I was headed back, and I was still single, and so I was flying up, and I was at where was I? I was at the Pentagon, yeah, and I was on a team doing worldwide inspections, so I was getting these great jobs like, okay, you have a 2-week inspection tour at Hawaii. So I called Barbara and I said, hey, the team's going to Hawaii these dates. Can I buy you a ticket? She said, yes. So a few months later, I got okay, the team is going to Heidelberg, Germany for 2 weeks for an inspection trip. Barb, you want to go to Germany? Yeah, send her a ticket. So she'd fly, and we'd fly over to these places and spend time together, and I'd go off during the day and do our inspections. I was on a nuclear weapons inspection team, and we had to go certify nuclear weapon capable units that they were capable of following all the laws and regulations for security and nuclear weapons, the operations of how to put them into operation to actually shoot them, that sort of thing. So we were experts in all things nuclear weapons, from cannons to missiles, rockets, you name it. And we traveled the world doing that. And I got to bring my lovely bride-to-be on those trips until we got married. And then I've been doing that for a couple of years, and Department of the Army called me and they said, so Branham, you've been selected for command of a field artillery battalion or an Apache helicopter squadron. Which would you like? I said, Apache helicopter squadron. Sign me up. They said, okay. So you're off to Fort Rucker, Alabama to get your Apache transition, and then you'll be going to Germany to take command of your Apache squadron. So I went home and I said, honey, will you marry me? So we didn't have a lot of time, so we went down to Fort Rucker, and strangely, when I had served in Germany, there was this chief of chaplains in Germany, and his name was Allen, General Allen, Colonel Allen then. And he was now the chief of chaplains, and he was in the States, and he was close to Fort Rucker. And so I called him and I said, Colonel Allen, I have a new bride-to-be. We're going to be married at Fort Rucker, Alabama. Would you come up and preside over our wedding? And it was just going to be Barb and I, no family, just going into the chapel and the chaplain marrying us and sending us on our way. And so we are married at Fort Rucker, and we did our honeymoon down at Panama City Beach, which is still one of our favorite places in the world. And then we, I got my assignment for Apache Helicopter Squadron in Illesheim, Germany. And so this was a pretty dramatic change. Barb had a 16-year-old daughter who really didn't want her to leave, and she was going to have to go live with her dad, which she really didn't want to do. 18 by then, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll get it right. Thank you. That's why I need you. Finally, Barb said, I'm sorry, honey, I'm going off with Terry. We're going to be married, and we're going to Germany, and so you have to go live with your dad. So we made those arrangements, and I remember coming home, and we were in Minneapolis by then. All our families living in Minneapolis, and my dad drove us to the airport, and Barb was just a mess. She just was grieving leaving her daughter, grieving leaving her parents were there, and her friends and everything. And my dad said, could I give her one of my meds to help her kind of settle down a little bit? And I said, would you be okay taking a little med that'll kind of settle your nerves? And she said, yeah. So she took that. By the time we were on the airplane, she was nervous, got on the airplane, she fell asleep with my head on my shoulder, and we took off for Germany. We got to Germany, and we got our little house, which was a block from my office, right across from the parking tarmac where all the Apaches were. So she could always see when we were leaving. And whenever we'd go do missions, she would come out to the flight line. She was the only wife that would come out to the flight line, and she'd be going like this, giving us the hover directions, and this. She'd learned all the commands and all that, and she's giving me the hover directions, and I'm in the aircraft hovering for her and saluting her and taking off. And but as it turned out, we got there early December of 1990. And if you remember, just prior to that, Saddam Hussein had invaded into Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. And so the plan was for Apache helicopters to go and take out Saddam Hussein's tanks. And so we got to Illisheim, and I said, I've always been a night fighter. When I was in Cobras, I was a night fighter. When I was in Vietnam, I was a night fighter. I want our Apache Squadron to be the best night fighting unit in Germany. And my instructor pilot said, we can do that, sir. So we flew every other week. We flew at least a 2-hour mission, and we would fly on no moon nights most of the time, so that we'd have to just use our infrared to fly by. So you fly the Apache with one eye. You've got a reticle right here. You fly it with one eye, and it's infrared. So you see the ground is white, and anything that's hot shows up white. And anything that's dark, then the sky is dark. So you fly it, and we fly at 150 miles an hour, 30 feet above the ground. That was the way we would fly to go to the target so we wouldn't be detected by the enemy radar. So we're in country now for a few months, and the 3-star comes down to our unit from Corps, and he goes like, Iraq is invaded, we're going to war, it's going to be called Desert Storm. You're my best night qualified Apache squadron. You're going to be the first attack into Iraq against the Iraqi tanks. I said, we can do that, sir. So I went back and I told my guys, and I said, guys, we're going to be the first attack into Iraq to take out the Iraqi tanks. And they go like, oh, okay. And he said, so, sir, you know, you're the only guy in our unit that's ever been shot at. I said, yeah, I know that. So I said, I'll lead every attack. Oh, we like that, sir. Good. Thank you very much. So I was the first helicopter leading the 18 Apaches and flying across the desert, 150 miles an hour, 30 feet off the ground, flying with one eye, you know, had night vision goggles for backup if you needed them, but pretty much flew with the one eye. That was the most fun. And it was just, you know, it was just so much fun flying 150 miles an hour, 30 feet above the ground. You know, it was fun. It was just fun. It was such a kick, but not for everybody. Anyway, so we get the briefing. We're told here's where the target is. So we fly up through Saudi Arabia, and we're coming to the border, and I'm looking out, and my Apache system can see about 1.5 miles to 2 miles, and it can see things that are hot. So I could see 50 tanks or so lined up out there about 1 mile away. I go like, okay, guys, I see the bad guys. They're out there. So I'm going to take a right turn up here, and then we had a certain point in the flight where the other half of their flight would go left. So we'd come out and we'd be on line now about 500 meters across with 100 yards between each aircraft, and we'd be lined up all in a row, and then they would see the enemy tanks. So we all get up on line, and we look out there, and they go, okay, they heard us, they see us, and so as I'm coming up to make the right turn, from Vietnam, we had 50 cal machine guns. The NVA, North Vietnamese Army, had 50 cal machine guns. A 50 cal machine gun tracer looks like an on-fire watermelon when it goes by the cockpit. So I saw those often in Vietnam, and I say, okay, here comes some watermelon flare on fire coming towards my aircraft, and I see them coming, and I just lower my collective and get down a little bit lower, and they go over the top of me, and they land in front of me, and they go, I hear on the radio, sir, they're shooting at you. I go, no shit. Get up here and help me out. So we're online there, and the tanks start shooting at us, and the stupid Iraqis, they forget their tank round can only go 1 mile, and they didn't know what distance we were away from us. So the tank rounds are all landing in the dirt out in front of us, several hundred yards in front of us. So we're just sitting there, 18 Apaches, and there's 200 Iraqi tanks out there. I said, okay, guys, start blowing them up. So we'd send out our missiles, and the missile would come down, boom, and there'd be a tank on fire, boom, a tank on fire, boom, 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 boom. In no time, there's a dozen tanks, And in 7 minutes, there are 45 tanks burning. I had just stopped shooting, and I'm just counting, saying, you guys are awesome. I said, I'm counting 45 burning tanks now, and there were guys getting out of their tanks, running away. I could see, that good, my optic was that good. I could see guys getting out of their tanks at a mile away and running away from their tanks. And that's what they were doing, because they said, we're toast. We don't have a chance with these guys. So they're running away. I said, okay, guys, I don't think there's anything. If you see anything else, shoot at you, kill it. Otherwise, just let the rest be. They're all running away. So we went home that night. We had some bullet holes in the aircraft from when we had flown over some bad guys, but nothing serious. So we all went back. And we got back that night, and we all celebrated, and everybody made it home, and we're all pumped up, and it was about 2 in the morning. I don't think we got to sleep until 4 in the morning, and they woke us up at 11 a.m., and they said, Terry, there's more guys coming. They need you. General wants you to go back out there. Okay. Saddle up, guys. We're going back out. Going out back, same area. Okay, let's go. So here I am, leading them again. Daytime now, easier flying. Didn't have to have the reticle in front of my eye, just flying, having fun. Rocking, the music's going on in our ears. We're rocking the rock and roll music and just having a great time flying a helicopter, at 150 miles an hour. It's a rush. It really is. I can't even tell it. Can't even describe it to you. So we get out there to the day mission, and they moved us a little bit further down, and there's a fresh bunch of 50 tanks just coming online. They say, guys, the general wants us to take out these guys because these are fresh tanks up here, and they might try to make an end run over to our infantry guys. So take those guys out. So in about, I think it was maybe 13 minutes, we had all but a couple of their tanks, and half of their guys are running away again. They say, we're no match for those guys. Just get out of your tanks and run away. So we go back again. We say, okay, General, we cleaned that one up. He said, go, good. So we're sitting in our field location, and a Huey comes land, and here's 3-star General Franks. So General Franks was a Vietnam guy. I didn't tell you, so he lost I think I told you he lost his left leg below the knee, so he had a peg leg. And he gets out of the helicopter, and he's coming over, and he comes to the tent, and I go send my guys. I said, go get all the pilots out here. All the pilots come gather around. The general wants to congratulate you, and he says, you guys are awesome. You did a great job. You did exactly what I thought you would do, and you're the best squadron in the Army, and thank you for all you did. And so if I need you, I got the other guys have some fun too, so you might not be called out for a couple days yet. So go take a breather, go get a good night's sleep for a change. So we did that. And but in the meantime, I got to tell you a kind of an interesting story. So before Desert Storm, the Secretary of the Army knew that the Germany units were going to be the first units in the attack in Iraq. So he wanted to come to Germany and fly with an Apache squadron at night to see if they used the equipment as it was supposed to be used, and could they do the mission at night. So General Franks calls me and he says, Terry, the Secretary of the Army is coming. He wants to fly in a Black Hawk and observe your night mission. And so go out and show him what you do. Okay? So the General Chief of Staff of the Army shows up, and he brings, what he does is he brings the Secretary of the Army first, 2 days before. And the Secretary of the Army comes into the meeting, and he brings us 1-star with him, and the 1-star comes up to me and he says, Branham, whatever you do, don't talk about the maintenance problems with the Apache. I said, but, he says, do not talk about the maintenance problems with the Apache. I walked away. I said, okay. So the Secretary of the Army shows up, and he gets in the front seat of an Apache. He's been gone to the Fort Rucker, Alabama. He got in a simulator, and he's been in the front seat of an Apache in the simulator, and he knows how to operate the switches and the film and the camera and all that and see everything. So he's good. He's going to be in the front seat of an Apache, and we're going to fly a mission with him. Okay. So we go out and fly the mission, and comes back and said, well, that went really well. That's what I needed to see. Thanks. And the Secretary of the Army says, now tell me about the maintenance problems with the Apache. And the 2 stars over there going like this, and I open my notebook, I take out my report, and I hand it to him. I said, sir, here are the issues we have. We have $100,000, there's 4 rotor blades on an Apache. Each one costs $100,000. They're supposed to last for 1,000 hours. They're starting to delaminate at 500 hours. If they delaminate significantly, the aircraft crashes. We have $100,000 gearboxes. There's 2 of them, a 45 and a 90. $100,000 for a gearbox. They're supposed to last for 250 hours before they're replaced. They're starting to have spalling and metal particles in the oil at 100 hours. So there's been a couple fatal Apache crashes now from maintenance issues. So my guys are going like, what do we do, sir? I says, you give me the data, I'll take care of it. So the Secretary of the Army says, can you tell me about your maintenance problems? And the 2 stars going like this, and I open my report, and I hand him my report. I said, sir, here are the items we are tracking. $100,000 rotor blades, $100,000 gearboxes, $5 million transmissions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I said, these are going to kill somebody someday. And he looks at the report, he says, this is exactly what I needed, Colonel. Thank you very much. He takes his report and he leaves. The 2-star turns to me and he says, you're done, Branham. I'm going to run you out of the Army. I'm going to run you out of command. You're not ever going to find a job in the U.S. Army after this day. I said, sir, I don't lie for anybody, so you do what you want to do. That really pissed him off. So he storms out, and I get my report card, do not promote, do not send to Army War College. So I go, well, okay, I'm happy. Hey, I commanded an Apache helicopter squadron. I'm good. I'm happy. My Army career is complete. So I'm sitting back there, and about 4 days later, I hear a helicopter landing outside, and my guys come out and they go, sir, General Franks just landed. I said, okay. I'll walk outside. Sir, Colonel Branham. He says, yeah, take a walk with me. Okay, we take a walk outside where no one can hear us. He says, what the hell happened? I said, sir, are you referring to the Secretary of the Army's visit? He says, yes. I said, well, sir, you know the problems we're having with the Apache. And I said, I love my men. I'm not going to lie about maintenance issues for anybody. You can do what you want to me, but I am not going to lie or tell somebody something and kill any of my men. And he goes, well, now what do I do, Branham? I said, well, I don't know, sir, but, that I stand on that. If you need to relieve me, then so be it. But I did what I was supposed to do, and my men respect me, and I respect myself, and that's what's important to me. And he says, well, you're my guy. You're my guy. You're going to lead the first attack into Iraq. I need you. I can't relieve you. I said, well, sir, then we have a deal. I'm your guy. I want to be your guy. He said, okay, you're going to lead the first attack into Iraq. I said, okay, sir, thank you very much. So went back, and the report card went forward, and we went to Desert Storm. We were in 3 attacks. We destroyed more enemy tanks than any other Apache squadron in Desert Storm. And after the war, he flew down to the unit and he said, so Terry, he said, you had a great run. You did exactly what I thought. He said, now it's time for you to move on to your next job. I said, well, sir, where do I go? And he says, Yeah, I don't know. He said, no Army general is going to take you because you disobeyed an order of a 2-star general, and the 2-star general tanked you in every aspect. He said, so you need to find a job in a non-Army base. I said, okay, I got night training experience. I'm sure somebody needs a night fighter somewhere to do something. So I go back to home and I tell Barb, I said, well, honey, we're leaving here, but I don't know where I'm going. I have to call Department of the Army and find out what they have for me. So I called Department of the Army and I say, hi, it's Lieutenant Colonel Terry Branham. He said, oh, we've been expecting your call. I said, okay. He said, what do you got for me? He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, you tell me, what did you have for me to do? He said, well, the Department of State has an operation called the Drug War in Central and South America, and we need somebody with a lot of night experience to take that unit over. I said, well, where are we based? He said, Patrick Air Force Base, Florida. I said, I'll take that job. So we were headed off to Patrick Air Force Base, Florida. Went home, saw our families, and flew down to Florida and got a house about a block off the beach. And we thought, okay, life should be pretty good here. And I had guys that had good night experience, and they had volunteered for the unit. They had been there for a while, but the guy before me wasn't as courageous as I was, wasn't really willing to go out there and do the job with them, so they didn't feel they had a leader. So they weren't really capturing many drugs, daytime or nighttime. So I said, well, okay, I'm the guy that turned that around. I hate drugs. He said, okay. So I had helicopters in Peru, Bolivia, Guatemala, Ecuador, and Belize, Peru. So I wanted an Army officer at each of those bases to oversee my helicopters and oversee the training of the helicopter pilots that were going to be flying the missions. So I had to go around, I had to call all my friends in the Army and I say, hey, I'm doing this drug war thing based out of Florida, but I need an officer, I need a captain in Peru, and I need a captain in Guatemala, and a captain in Bolivia to take over to run the operations in each of those countries to go do raids, taking down drug cartel guys and capturing cocaine that's being transported out of you know where. So I call a few guys, and I went, one of the guys that had been in my unit, in our unit at Illisheim, was Captain Mike Carr. And Mike Carr was now running a Apache unit in Fort Hood, Texas. I said, Mike, I need guys to manage the programs in these countries taking down drugs and drug cartel guys. I said, does that job interest you? And he says, working for you? Yeah, sign me up. I said, do you want Bolivia, Peru, Guatemala? Guatemala, okay, Mike, you got Guatemala. So then I got a couple of lines on other guys that I've flown with and called them, and they were willing to go. So I lined up a guy for Peru and lined up a guy for Bolivia. And so now I had my team, and now I needed pilots. So I would call friends around the country and Department of the Army, and I'd say, I need warrant officer pilots to fly in Bolivia, Peru, Guatemala, Belize, Ecuador, taking down drug cartel guys. And I filled up pilots within a month. I had all my helicopters filled. So I had these great Super Hueys with super engines made for mountains, because some of the mountains there were a couple thousand feet high. And our mission was to get vectors. We had CIA aircraft that would track the aircraft leaving with drugs out of Bolivia and Peru, where they got most of the cocaine. And they would track them, and they would tell us what airstrip or grass airstrip they were going to land in Peru or in Guatemala or Belize or sometimes down south even in Belize especially, because Belize was just an easy hop into Mexico. So they would track them, and they'd say, and I'd get my guys in the air, and they'd get a hold of the CIA air tracking aircraft, and he'd vector them in behind them, and they'd land the fixed wing aircraft with all the cocaine on board, and my Hueys would come right in behind them, and we went and found Army Rangers that wanted to still be in the action. And so we had Army Rangers on the Hueys, and the Army Rangers would deploy and take down these aircraft, and all the shooters that they had on those aircraft, they'd take them out, and the average bust would be $40 million of cocaine and $100,000 in cash. And we would do 2 or 3 of those a week and 2 or 3 of those at night during the week in Guatemala. Because Guatemala was the strip where they'd take it in, there'd be a truck that'd take it up, and then NAFTA, if you remember, our great president opened up NAFTA for the roads to go, the trucking system to go right into America. So they'd put that on trucks, and those trucks would take the cocaine all the way right into the United States. So that's how it was working, in that we were taking out all this drugs. So I got a call shortly thereafter from the FBI, and the FBI said, so Terry, I know who you are, I know what you're doing, and I got to tell you, the cartel guys have a hit out on you and a hit out on your wife, $10,000 on each of your head. I went, okay. They said, but they know what a bad guy you are, and so they haven't had a lot of guys signing up for the job. I said, that's good news, thank you. So they had researched my name, I guess, and so, but I did tell Barb, and we did sleep with guns under our pillows. I gave her a .38 revolver, and I had a 9mm, and we had a beach house. We had a pool in our backyard, and we had a sliding glass door, and so we'd sleep with the sliding glass door open with just a screen door, so if the back gate opened, I left the hinges so they would creak, so they would wake me up. So if I ever heard anybody creaking the door open, I knew to wake up and be ready. Nobody ever came for us. And I got a call a few months later, and they go, yeah, Branham, how it's going? I said, well, sir, it's going well from my end. He said, how about you? What did you report? Well, everybody kind of got the word on you, and nobody's willing to take you on. So you're probably in good shape. I said, thank you very much. That's what we were hoping for. So we did that for 2 years. We were very successful. State Department was sad when Barb finally said, so we'd been there for 2 years, and her daughter was going to get married. 2.5 years. Her daughter was getting married, and she said, honey, I'm going home, and I hope you're coming with me. She had the power. And I said, honey, I'm as tired as you are. I'm ready to go home. So we called Department of the Army. I said, find me a replacement. I'm going home. And so we went home, and we came back to Minneapolis and settled into a life here that we love, and got to have her oldest daughter get married, and life has been great for the past 36 years. 38. Lose track of time. Bad with time. Yeah. So I retired from the Army then at the end of 1993. Came home to Minnesota and our families. I got a civilian job, and now I want to have my lovely wife answer some questions that she's prepared to do.
There, it's on.
Yep.
Well, honey, you left out a lot of the cool stuff. First of all, our kids were 19 when we went to Germany, and they came to visit us. Second of all, we gave them a choice. Please come be with us, live with us. We'll have a great life. No, we want to stay here in Minnesota. So it's not like I just left them, because I'm still dealing with that after 38 years. But I guess as far as some of the things that Terry didn't share was the drug war was really a spiritual war, where all his officers that he hired, or warrant officers also, the first thing he asked them was, are you a Christian? Do you believe in God? I don't want you stealing drugs or money because you're going to get in trouble, so I have to know that you're going to be,
Yep.
you know, and
Yeah.
they were all our friends from Germany because we were a family.
Yeah, the first question was always, tell me about your church life. And they go, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me about your church life.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really go to church. I'm sorry, I can't use you. I'd
Yeah.
find somebody else.
So when, of course, I said yes to Terry to marry him, I mean, I guess I was just so in love, and so whatever, I didn't know what the military was. I didn't have a clue. Minnesota people, myself, being Minnesota all my life, 41 years old, I didn't have a clue what I was getting into, other than being Terry's wife, because that's all I wanted. So when we were at the Pentagon and you were ready to go to all your schooling before you took command, we had, I don't know, some function. I was probably your goodbye, hail and farewell. The Army has lots of, the military has lots of fancy things that people do, and it was a hail and farewell for when you were leaving. And your boss came up to me. He was a two-star general, and he said, ma'am, I hear you're new in the military. And I said, yeah, what do you think? And he says, well, can I give you some advice? And I went, oh my gosh, please give me some advice. He says, well, first of all, just be yourself. And it's like, oh, really? That's all I have to do is be myself? And he says, yeah. He said, but most of all, second of all, don't wear your husband's rank. And by then, Terry was a colonel. Oh, no, you were still a lieutenant colonel. I didn't even know. But anyway, he said, don't wear your husband's rank. And I said, oh, yeah, about that. I said, what comes first lieutenant or second lieutenant? And he goes, oh, you're going to be fine. So, yeah, that was... I mean, I loved the military, but shoot me a question, because Val sent these lovely questions today. And
What was your experience during his deployments? How did you manage the worry and uncertainty?
Yeah. Of course, you never know when you're marrying a husband that he's going to go off to war someday during your married life. So when we get to Germany, and the women love that I knew nothing about the Army. They loved, oh my gosh, the colonel's wife is coming in and she knows nothing. Let's take over. And, but they liked me, so they helped me. They helped me be a good commander's wife. And they, you know, we became a family. We're still, I mean, we're godparents to their kids. Yep. I'm sorry, but you know, I know civilians, because I was a civilian for so long, I never would have known what the military is like. And you do become family because you have to, because you need, you know, that support. And when the guys left for the war, I mean, you know, by then, I mean, I kind of knew what I was doing. Other than, you know, I still needed guidance from the XO's wife, who had been in 20 years with her husband and stuff, but they all knew that's all I cared about was the women and the kids. I was taking care of them. I'm a caretaker. I mean, we were a good family unit, and they loved that I cared about them. And I love the enlisted wives, and the captain's wives used to get so mad at me, like, you don't have to hang out with the enlisted wives. And let's go, but they're fun, and they were, just so good. So when the guys deployed, and I'll never forget, we all went to the hangar. You guys all got on buses did you fly out of Frankfurt or Nuremberg, wherever
Nuremberg.
Nuremberg, and there were 300 women, and I don't know how many little kids, and we're all saying goodbye to our husbands. And I mean, of course I fell apart. I mean, because I didn't even ever dream I was going to be saying goodbye to you to a war. So you guys left, and I just remember the first letter I got from you saying, the look on your face when I looked out the bus window, what I saw, I pray I never see that again, because hopefully, after this war, we're done. No more wars. But the deployment, when they were gone, of course, the women, we were together all the time. We did support groups. We went on lots of German tour things, the Wachterbach dishes, all the crystal. I mean, we had some amazing women, and we just made the time with our husbands gone the best we could, and we prayed a lot. The other thing I did, your chaplain went with you to the desert, so we had a new chaplain come in, and I didn't know him, but I went to chapel. I went to our chapel every day. It was right across the street, and I used to sit at his desk going, I'm not doing good. Help me. I need to be strong. And he said, well, what are you doing to help yourself? And I said, well, I'm praying, but he's still at war, and I haven't heard from him for 2 weeks. And because back then we were just writing letters. We didn't have phones to text or FaceTime or whatever. So I just remember the chaplain constantly saying, endure, this will pass. Just keep the faith, keep the trust. And that's what I would bring to our ladies when they would come to me at 2 in the morning going, we're not doing good. What do we do? Well, we pray, and we know our husbands are trained well. Got a great commander that's trained them. They love flying those dang Apaches. So, you just have to trust in God. And I found one of the papers, I had to write in a paper every month, what our unit was doing. We're the 2-6 Cavs. And, it would just be a page of whatever, and I just write like I talk. And I read it today, and it was like I just wrote it yesterday, because is like I say to my friends today that call me that are hurting, I go, keep the faith, trust God. Just, that's what I wrote in this newspaper that I put out once a month with, for the women to read, to help them through, what we were going through. And our girls came to see us, and they didn't come during wartime because, of course, we didn't want that. But it was just, it's a different world, military life. You out there, and there are a lot of you that have served in the military, thank you for your service. And the best thing we did that when we came home, we've been retired 31 years now, is what we did was we stayed involved with the military. We got involved with the Yellow Ribbon. We adopted military families and brought them meals, and Terry would take care of their lawn and the snow and whatever. And we stayed connected with the families, because here in Minnesota, you don't know who's been, who's in the military with National Guard. The National Guard people, they don't live on a base here. We have no bases in Minnesota. So there's not that support. So we went to the National Guard to see who we could adopt for a unit to support. And I started women's support groups and mom groups, to help the moms that their husbands were going to be deployed for 12 months with little kids. just how can we help you? What can we do? I know what you're going through. I know what it feels like. So tell me, because this is why I'm here, I guess.
Yeah, you were babysitting for
Babies.
moms. Babies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Babies having babies. And
Yeah. Okay, I get one more question, and it's almost 8 o'clock, and it's time, honey,
What
because I know
values-
when to quit.
Yeah. What values, lessons from your years do you hope to pass down to your children, grandchildren,
Oh.
or to other military spouses?
Yeah. Well, of course, other military spouses, if they're in, I tell them just keep the faith, keep trusting your husband and God. Know that it's going to be okay if you are constantly staying centered with what's really important, with, God's in control. That used to be one of your themes, God's in control, because he is, and they all loved when I would talk about that. And as far as our girls, our girls know a lot of our stories, but our grandkids, they know the most, and they love the stories the most. And they're constantly, and now, our oldest grandson's gonna be 30, so they, they're old, and they tell their friends about, us, and they'll bring their friends over. Yeah, I want you to meet my grandpa. And when they were teenagers, the boys came over and said, Grandma, have you ever Googled Grandpa? And I went, no, why? And he says, you gotta Google Grandpa. So, and that's what we really tell our military, especially the young ones. Tell your military stories. Tell the life that you lived. Even though you were in fear, you were scared, you didn't know what was next, but yet you knew God was there and you have the faith. And the grandkids go, yeah, because, you two are our mentors, you're our role models, and look what you've been through. So that was, just kind of the best thing of, for my life is the stories that we can share, with the people we love and the people that love us. And we don't brag about what we do. We just did our job. We just did what we needed to do. And half the time I didn't know what I was doing other than, like the general said, be yourself. So that was kind of it.
Am I lucky or what? Thank you. Any questions? Take a few questions. Sure.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to know if you could quickly tell the story, and it might have been when you finally landed the helicopter after it had been all blown up.
Oh.
You found out the report the next day, and I don't remember all the details, but
Yeah. And the thing was totally burned out, and the guy said you should have crashed.
Yeah.
And you got down because of God. Yeah, that story?
that's right. That's so cool. It's like,
Yeah, there were many times. Of course, I know all his stories, but most of them are. It was God that, just like when you had to land, and this was in Vietnam, just total woods, and all of a sudden you saw, what were those cutters that they did?
Daisy cutter bomb.
Daisy cutter, so Terry could land and they could go fight, the guys that they were supposed to fight. Oh, Carrie.
Now, this is probably for Terry. Do you know, is it a hint? Are people still, or soldiers still allowed to pray in the military? Is that something that is being taken from?
No, absolutely. There's prayer. The chaplain corps, Minnesota Guard that's been deployed several times, the chaplain corps, Mike Lotzer will tell you he was out there praying with men all the time.
And that's not
Praying out
worried
loud.
about that being taken
No,
away?
not at all. Even commanders can go in their units and say, we're going to pray before this mission.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's accepted throughout the Army now that if you're going to go die, you need to put some faith into this and let them know there's some place you're going to go.
Yeah.
Dan. I denied it. I guess the way a gunship pilot handles it is you go about saying, okay, I go to gunfights every day. I'm probably going to die, but I'm going to die before I go to battle. I'm going to pray, and I know that I'm going to go to heaven, and that's all that's important. It doesn't matter if I die, as long as I go to heaven. That's what this is all about. That's what life on this earth is all about. And honor your job, honor the United States military that has this proud tradition to go do your job, and don't worry about whether you die or you don't die. Just go do your job. And that's the way I would talk to my men, and say, I know not all of you are Christians, but you need to go do your job. I'm demanding you do your job. If you don't do your job, I'm going to crush you. Do your job, and if you die, we'll take care of your family, we'll honor you, but do your job and be proud of what you do.